Okay. Hey, how you doing? So my audio is going to be a little all over the place for this video. I had to re-record some parts, and most parts I recorded in a car. So, please bear with me for this process. And start. So I actually struggle with immense feelings of guilt, right? And it's tough because it feels like things I shouldn't feel guilty for, right? Or like things I can't even quite figure out. Like I sometimes just feel guilty or feel sad without even knowing why, right? And a lot of times they call that depression. And I'm not saying that it isn't. Guilt is an interesting thing. When I sat back and looked around at like why I was feeling these ways, because I was just really happy and doing very well. I keep a close eye on myself. I like to be very self-aware because of my mental health and my mental struggles. So when I know I'm doing really good, I'm quite clear on it. And so when I go from feeling like I'm doing really good, I'm seeing the beauty in life, and I'm like, things are just wonderful for me, and I can take the things I feel grateful for and really feel that gratefulness, really express it, really make it bigger than life. It hurts my feelings when then out of nowhere I'm suddenly feeling guilty for everything in the world, because in my mind I'm still paying attention to what I'm grateful for, and I'm still paying attention to what I'm grateful for, and I'm still trying to be bigger than life, and I'm still changing the way I'm looking at things, but the guilt is still heavy on my heart. And I feel like this message is great for people who struggle with that, because for a long time I thought I was just a negative person, that no matter what, like I was the one who just wasn't being positive enough. And not even in the sense that I was disregarding my feelings, because I felt like I would acknowledge my feelings, I would acknowledge the guilt, I would acknowledge the things that happened around me, and I would do my best to release them, but I just felt I couldn't release them. So I would feel like naturally I just choose these draining energies, and I'm just not strong enough or right enough or aligned enough, and feel all this shame for it. So I decided to come here in a moment where I'm feeling, I'm struggling with some of that guilt. So what I realized there's something in me that didn't want to acknowledge the guilt, right? So part of me knows what the guilt is about, but the other part of me is like, we can release that because we understand there's nothing to feel guilty about, or we understand that the reasons we feel guilty and the fact that this is part of who we are, and that we make the conscious choices to either sit with this guilt and decide what we have done makes us who we are, or what we will choose to do makes us who we are. But while half of my mind is doing that, the other half is still lingering in, what? I feel awful. Like, I don't know what to do with these feelings. So, the first thing I want to do is look at what happened. Okay? Usually it comes to me when it's built up a bit, so it's not only one thing I'm feeling guilty for, but things that keep adding on and on. I know that I was feeling guilty about not speaking to my family enough. I know I was feeling guilty about asking for things or having them continuously buy things for me and then still not speaking to them enough. But I also knew within me, I don't have it in me to speak. It just didn't feel in me to speak. It just doesn't. I'm in a state right now where I almost struggle to talk to a lot of people, and that includes a lot of my family. And so I feel guilt for not just being able to say, okay, well, bump that. That's your family. Just talk to them. I feel like I can't just get over what I'm dealing with, or I can't release what I'm dealing with and choose to be bigger than it. I feel like I'm intentionally making myself smaller than it, and that makes me feel guilty. simply because I acknowledge the fact that I just don't want to do those things right now. And whether that's a good or a bad thing is for me to decide. I could literally take it and say, I simply just don't want to talk. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, I just don't want to talk, and nobody's upset at me for it. I'm feeling all these responsibilities I don't need to feel, and decide it's okay. And this doesn't need to add to my guilt anymore. And that can lighten my guilt load, right? Like, it's entirely possible that people accept this about me and nobody cares. And I very well may decide that it's a bad thing. And that very well may add to more guilt. So, okay, this is where it goes wrong, right? I start to get overly thoughtful about it. And now I'm like, but it's bad to do this if I'm doing this. But it's good for me to do this. But maybe that's not actually standing in my power, and maybe that's me just making excuses not to do it. Whichever I decide kind of gives me the information I need. Like the ways I'm thinking about it, whether I feel like it's a bad thing or feel like it's a good thing, for whichever reason, gives me the information I need to see where a lot of my sadness is truly coming from. Because I'm unsure about whether I feel good or bad about my actions, or whether they should be judged or not. It doesn't feel like it's up to me. So then I go into unpacking more of it. And I say, okay, well, is it standing in my power to keep, not talking because that's just how I feel? Or is it me being stubborn and rude and just all about me and self-centered? It kind of goes down the slippery slope just because my brain is picking open all the possibilities, right? This isn't a thing to be ashamed of. I got a big brain. She's gonna start thinking. And so already I found something to hold on to that I love about myself in this moment that's attached to my guilt still. This is how I kind of start lightening my guilt and lightening the load, and that feeling that I'm just tied to negativity when I feel guilty. I start releasing the negativity that's tied to guilt. So, okay, what's the next thing that made me feel guilty? What's something else? I lied about something recently. I don't like to lie. And especially when it comes to very serious things, which this can be considered serious and not. But what I lied about, it didn't feel good because I just don't like to lie. And I felt ashamed for that. I felt ashamed for the fact that I felt I had to lie because I made the mistake in the first place. So there I was, feeling guilty for the mistake and then guilty for the lie on top of it. So again, I go in, okay, and I'm thinking about all these things, and this is where I start attaching all those different meanings, positivity and negativity, all the different possibilities to what I did, to the mistake that I made first off. You've seen before how it was about determining whether I felt my guilt was deserved or not. And the true answer is that the guilt is not deserved. And I get into that a little bit later. Typically, I either feel like the guilt was deserved, or I'm just overthinking everything and I don't know what to decide. The thing is either going to go, I'm not sure what the right answer is, or it's going to go, yeah, I did a bad thing, right? So this is what happens now if I've decided that the thing I did was bad. Let me be clear. The first thing is going to be acknowledging the guilt, right? That's going to lighten some of that guilt load. Now I have acknowledged that I have the guilt. It feels somewhat deserved because I don't like the thing that I did. I've decided my action is bad. So now my next step is deciding what happens next. What do I naturally feel is going to happen next that is causing some of this feeling inside of me? Well, guilt deserves punishment. I mean, that's what we naturally do, right? Is we feel like we deserve a bad consequence. Whether that means, harming someone else accidentally, things aren't going to go well for you anymore because you don't deserve it, deciding you're a bad person, those kind of consequences. Despite how bad that guilt felt, I realized I have felt the guilt. I am feeling the guilt. That in itself is a punishment. So whatever I think I'm going to get punished for, or deserve to get punished for, I'm already doing it. A lot of people don't earn guilt, right? Because guilt is not a necessity. Most people don't deserve to feel guilty. Like, unless you are intentionally harming another being, you don't deserve to struggle with the burden of guilt. Okay, well, if punishment is not what I deserve, then what is it? I made a mistake. You probably have made a mistake if you're feeling the same way. I decided, well, if I'm the kind of person who would feel guilty for this kind of mistake, then I'm obviously the kind of person who wouldn't make this mistake. So how can I see myself as the kind of person who wouldn't make this mistake, and who therefore will do everything in her power not to make it again? Therefore relinquishing any guilt I have now and any guilt I have in the future, because I know for a fact I didn't earn it. And those next steps would be deciding step by step how to react if you ever ended up in that situation again. And it doesn't help to just, because a lot of us are smart, overthinkers are brilliant. So yeah, in our heads we know exactly what it would be to do the right thing next time. We have already jumped to that conclusion because we are smart. So yeah, we know, but we don't embody it until we sit with it step by step, without shame, in full confidence with our brains. When we just jump to that, it races across our mind just like any other thought. You know how many thoughts? I don't know about you all, but my mind races heavily. I have so many thoughts that I don't even catch. So that thought running across your brain that you know what to do can pass just as quickly as the thought that you haven't had chocolate milk in a while, and then it's gone. Yeah, it's subconsciously in you, but you haven't embodied it. If we let our brains do the subconscious work of just jumping to the conclusion of, yeah, we know, and keep moving forward, we don't take the time to see what's happening subconsciously. Just as subconscious as that knowing is, our shame is the same way. Our shame is a subconscious reaction. So if we can't slow down the subconscious trains of thought, then we won't be able to slow down the shame. What helps you to embody it is to sit down and really calm your spirit by saying, oh, well, I have this information now to make these steps next time to avoid this mistake. And even if we don't avoid the mistake, we know that mistakes happen. And it's okay. But here are the steps for my preparedness next time. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that I wasn't prepared this time. I know I don't like it. Like, this is not my guilt to have, because this is not who I am. If you feel guilty about something, it's something that doesn't resonate with who you are. It's something that you wouldn't do and you don't like that you did. You don't like it. So you don't have to feel like the bad person who would do those things. So after I've taken the time to sit and be like, this is what I'm going to do next time, and I know better, and feel secure in myself, not saying I know better in order to shame myself like I should have known better beforehand. Like I had all this information beforehand. I knew how to do this in my mind. I knew how to take the steps and slow down. Alright? Say that this time it happened, no matter how many times it happens, this time it happens, I've gained even more information. I'm taking even more time to see it all through, so that I can see exactly how I can avoid certain things next time. And I know that I worked hard enough to try to embody the being who would not let these things happen. And therefore, I have paid my dues. my brain already subconsciously jumps to the conclusion, the negative conclusion, because that's what I've lived with for a long time. That's what I'm used to doing. So it's going to take time for my brilliant little brain, it's not little, to start saying, okay, this is how we maneuver through these things. And it's going to take me being patient and being with my brain and not just letting it jump to everything is the worst and I'm the worst. I messed up and I deserve to suffer. So yeah, those are two things that those are two examples of like things that make me feel guilty. And how I would go about maneuvering through them, whether I decided they were good or whether I decided they were bad. Like just taking the time alone to really sit with myself and say, okay, this is how we're thinking about these things. This is how this is going to go. Is really like calming for my brain. And I didn't know that. I thought what was calming was knowing everything that I knew. But it wasn't. Because if I stuck with that stuff, I would always feel bad. Because that's the stuff that's making me feel bad. So yeah, that's the message I have for today. If you're feeling guilt, I hope it made sense. I'm still learning how to communicate what I'm trying to say, but I feel pretty good about this message so far. So, alright, thanks so much for listening to me open my big juicy mouth, and I will see you all later. Bye.